What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to today's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast. And I want to start this episode with a question. Have you guys ever had an idea throughout your organization or an idea for a business, but you haven't really been able to turn it into anything? Well, if that is the case, today's episode is perfect for you because I'm joined by Nick Jain. Nick Jain is the CEO of IdeaScale, the largest innovation software company in the world. IdeaScale helps large, complex organizations innovate faster, better, and more systematically. And clients include many of the world's most prestigious organizations, such as the US Post Office, Pfizer, Comcast, Grant Thornton, and many others. Nick graduated at the top of his class from Harvard Business School and has led companies in radically diverse industries, including trucking, men's fashion, finance, and now B2B software. Nick, it is such a privilege to have you on today's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast. So guys, with that being said, let's jump into today's episode. Nick, thanks for joining us, man.
Thank you so much for having me and for the very kind introduction.
Heck yeah. I do got to say, this podcast usually is a little bit more laid back, and you got the nice attire on for anybody who's watching out there. Nick's dressed all fancy right now, so thanks for coming prepared for the show.
Thank you. I got teased by my wife and my local neighbors. I'm walking around wearing too many tank tops during the summer, and so one of my neighbors actually joked. He saw me suit and tie for the first time. He's like, "I did not recognize you," because he's so used to eating in shorts. And
I love it. So right before we hit record on today's episode, everybody, me and Nick were just talking. He actually recently moved from New York City. He's been living there for quite some time, and his family's about to expand here. And so him and his wife, they moved on over to Philadelphia so they can get to know their neighbors and, not live in an apartment where you don't know a single one of your neighbors. So Nick, tell us your favorite thing about Philadelphia so far.
Sure. I think it's probably boils down to two things. Number one is I actually know my neighbors, right? Day one, after I moved into my new place, we're sitting out on the porch, you're grabbing beers with the local neighbors. Everyone's inviting each other into the backyards. Me and my next four door neighbors our backyards are all connected. We walk around, our cats wander around, and that's like,
love it.
Wonderful. And the second is that it is, there's a lot going on in Philadelphia, right? It's a big city. It's not as big as New York, but it has just a lot of fun stuff going around. So whether you're an art person, whether you're a sports person, whether you like me, you like playing poker, there's stuff around for pretty much everybody in every walk of life.
Yeah, and the thing that I originally asked you is how you liking the sports out there. And he told me, guys, that he was more of a player than a watcher. But it is quite an interesting place because it is the city of brotherly love. And then I was joking with Nick here, it is until the Eagles play or the Phillies play. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, no, thankfully I live far away from the stadium, so I do not have to deal with the traffic. A buddy of mine lives right next to the Philly stadium and is not a happy camper.
Yeah, I bet. But as a baseball fan myself, I would absolutely love that, being able to hear and watch. I go to too many games. I probably would get no work done, to be honest. But well, great stuff. Nick, you obviously have had quite a lot of success for being such a young guy here. You're just getting going on your journey, it seems like, in a lot of ways, but you still have so much experience to already talk about. So I want to start from your early days outside of IdeaScale, and we'll kind of work our way into that as the episode progresses. So tell us about your early days. How was Harvard Business School to get started?
Sure. So, I don't know if that qualified as my early days, but HBS was an interesting experience, right? I grew up I'm a pretty stereotypical, poor immigrant kid. My parents showed up with the shirts on their backs and literally like $10 in their pockets from India. So for a guy like me to show up at HBS was kind of a very, very odd experience, right? On one hand, it's super welcoming. They don't really care where you're from. On the other hand, some of your classmates have last names that are, news items. There were classmates who had, whose parents were presidents of countries. So that was certainly a weird experience for a normal person. On education, it was great, right? You got to meet people from really all different parts of the world, all different industries. And personally, it was obviously a tremendous growth experience for me. I showed up knowing a lot about certain areas of how a business runs. I knew a lot about finance. I knew a fair bit about strategy. I knew a lot about PowerPoints and Excel. I didn't know much about HR or how to, work in a factory and all the different portions of an organization. So got to learn a lot more about that, which was, good. And it was a fun time to top it off.
I love it. My wife and I just visited Boston this past summer. Like I mentioned, we're big baseball fans, so we were going out to catch a Red Sox game. And so one of our stops, we went over to the Harvard Business School, and the campus is just beautiful. You got the river right next to it, beautiful trees. It was nice weather. Living over there, I can imagine, is just amazing year round.
Yeah, except it's really cold in Boston. I lived there
That's fair.
for 4 years or 5 years between business school and some work, and not a big fan of the like 10-degree winters.
Yeah, I feel you on that. We're living out in Utah. My wife's from Utah. We're living out here right now, and it is cold during the winters out here as well. So we're thinking about maybe eventually heading down to southern Utah where it can get a little bit warmer. We still are kind of close to family, but have our own thing going on over there. So we'll see what ends up happening. So let's take it a step farther. So in Harvard Business School, like you mentioned, you met a lot of influential figures, or quote unquote influential figures. People who had already ran their own companies. People were coming from very prominent backgrounds. What kind of there's a term that I like to throw around out there, and I want to get your take on this. There's the term of imposter syndrome. This feeling of we do not belong in the situation that we are in, despite probably, especially in your case, you obviously did the work in school. You made the case for you to be there, and yet sometimes when you're sitting and you look to your right and you have the daughter of some family who's uber famous and high up in the political status in some country. Then you look to your left and this guy, he's already started and exited one of his first businesses. What was it like to be in a classroom setting with those kind of students around you? And did you ever feel like an imposter in that group?
Sure. So again, very weird when you are, you see all these people on the news, you hear these last names. Very weird to be in a room filled with not just one person, right? And anytime you go to a bar, there's probably one person in that bar who's, reasonably famous or connected. But to be filled in a room filled with people like that is certainly a strange experience. I didn't feel an imposter syndrome because the way HBS constructs its class is very much they try and get people who have very very different backgrounds, right? You have the A-listers, but then you also have you know somebody who started their own company from scratch, right? Bootstrap. Somebody who worked at a nonprofit and just really may not have made a ton of money, may not be famous, but made an impact on people's lives. Then you have yeah, my honest self description of myself is I'm a grinder. I just work my butt off.
Hmm.
And so you have a bunch of people like me. And so we all knew that we were there for distinct reasons, right? My reason for being there is perhaps different than yours, but or at least I felt that like I'd earned it because I'd been working for 20 years to have that shot in life.
That makes sense. So while you're going to Harvard Business School, at what point did you start working? I included three of them here, and specifically in your bio. You worked in the trucking industry, you worked in men's fashion and finance, and obviously now B2B SaaS. At what point in the journey did those kind of different stages of life commence?
Sure. So before business school, I was pretty much 100% Wall Street finance guy. I worked at Bain Capital on their private equity team. After business school, actually, I went back to Wall Street and worked as a professional investor at a large hedge fund called Greenlight. Started my own tiny, tiny hedge fund after leaving them. So really, most of my career was spent, or the first half of my career was spent in finance. And about 5 years ago, I got a random call saying, "Hey, Nick, do you want to co-run a $100 million revenue trucking company?" And that's a really like extraordinary opportunity when you
Oh,
are kind of in your late 20s, early 30s, and you get a random call.
who was
I
this
never,
random call from? And tell them to ring some of my listeners' lines. They're looking for an opportunity like that.
I mean, in all fairness, I'd been working and building a reputation, but it was kind of an extraordinary call, right? So I knew nothing about trucking. I'd never really worked in a real company, right? Wall Street is really, you work really hard, but you're not working in a real company. You're not making a product or service. You're doing good things for your investors.
Hmm.
But yeah, it was, but for me personally, like I'd always wanted to run a company and make an impact in a more tangible way. B, when you get an extraordinary career opportunity like that, you say yes, right? You may not know anything about anything, and I certainly didn't know anything about trucking showing up. So it was a lot of hard work learning about a very new industry where I'd had a little experience, but it was a really fun experience. And then since then, somehow my career has morphed into being what I jokingly call I'm a professional CEO. People hire me to run companies that are ready for their next phase of growth or require turnaround. So far I've run or co-run a $100 million revenue trucking company, a small $2 million men's shoe startup, and now I have the great pleasure of running IdeaScale, which I'm hoping to be here for quite a long time.
So let me ask you this specific with Idea Scale. Was this your baby? You were one of the founders of it, or did you jump in kind of later, just like you did with the other businesses when
Yeah,
they were
just
already
like the
running?
other businesses. So other than my own small hedge fund, which I'd founded, I have, not really started any of these businesses. These are all pre-existing business. In the case of IdeaScale, it was founded, I believe, in 2009 by two guys, Rob and Viv, who
Okay.
noticed that there was need for large organizations to innovate. Rob then led the company for the first 13 years. And then when he was retiring about 2 years ago, him and Viv brought me in as the CEO to take IdeaScale from, a successful mid-sized organization to a more globally impactful organization.
So let's talk about the principles behind IdeaScale. I mean, when you first sent it to me, I looked on your guys' website when we were first chatting before we recorded this episode, and it was pretty straightforward. It seems like a very straightforward process to help lower level employees be able to get their ideas across in a large organization where sometimes their voices might not be heard. So tell us kind of the framework behind the idea and how the business actually runs.
So you just perfectly described, right? If so, I'll start with kind of two principles. Number one is exactly what you said. In a large organization, it's really hard unless you're sitting at the boardroom or the CEOs, 5 or 6 people in their inner circle for your voice to ever be heard. You could be
Yeah.
somebody in a satellite office or somebody who in a different country who may not have those language skills, or just maybe 2 levels down from the CEO. Your ideas never get heard, and you may have great ideas. And that's doesn't really matter if it's you and 5 people, but if you're a 10,000 person organization, you have a lot of secret geniuses running around, or maybe they're not geniuses, but their individual ideas may be really brilliant and impactful.
Yes.
So our software tries to help you solve that problem. And it solves it in 2 ways. Number one, it creates a software solution where everybody can contribute their ideas, and ideas can be upvoted and downvoted and go viral, just like on TikTok, right? Except instead of a funny dance video or a cat video, it is an idea that is impactful to your organization's mission, whether that be a new product, whether that be cost cutting, whether that be how you make your employees happy or whatever, right? Something to
Are
make
these ideas anonymous when somebody's
it's your
upvoting or
choice.
downvoting, or it's okay? So you can pick.
Totally your choice. You can,
Okay.
so we use our own software, for example, and sometimes I submit an idea under my own name, and sometimes I submit it anonymously because I don't want people to know, this idea is wacky or it comes from the CEO.
Right,
So,
right.
right?
And see,
Because
well, then sometimes it could give honest feedback too, where a lot of times they might be thinking, "Oh, Nick said this, we got to upvote," but oh, it's anonymous now, so I'm gonna actually sit back and say, "I don't like this idea as much."
So I can't say, it varies culture to culture, but in our organization, people downvote my ideas regularly. I have some ideas
Hey,
that have
that's
like
very good.
negative
I like
10
that.
votes.
I like that.
So they have negative scores. But so you can imagine, like, number one, you're collecting all these ideas. And number two, the best ideas are floating upwards naturally, going viral through an upvote, downvote, and some, AI in the back, not AI, let's say like quantitative algorithms in the background. And so you have the best ideas, and then we finally help you take those ideas and turn them, into project management. We help you turn those ideas into reality, because an idea is great, but you ideally want something in the real world. And so the other problem that we're solving there is that there's always this misconception that great ideas come from geniuses in the shower, that eureka moment, that somebody's just, doing something, they have a spark of genius. In the real
That's not
world,
how it
that's
happens.
a terrible
That's
way
not
to
how it
run.
happens.
You should not roll like the classic example is Einstein. You think, we all think of Einstein as just genius. We didn't think of the fact that for 30 years he was working in anonymity, coming up with all these great ideas. We just think about the fact, oh, the guy came up with a couple of cool things. Real innovation, especially for impactful organization, right? Whether you're talking about the iPhone or pick your favorite device, toy, invention, whatever, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of people, and there's a process. And companies that do this consistently, so like using Apple as an example, Apple comes out with a lot of great products, and they're not one-hit wonders. And the reason they're able to do this is because they have a process to innovate. And many large organizations actually really suck at this, which is where our software really tries to help them become more systematic at this.
So once again, just making sure I understand this and all the listeners out there. Let's say I'm a C-tier employee. I'm not directly connected with the higher ups whatsoever, but I think to myself, okay, I'll say I'm customer support, for instance. I recognize there's a growing issue inside of our customer support line where we're actually not managing our time very wisely. And an average customer support call is taking 15 minutes when it should be taking only around 11 minutes. So what I would do is I go on IdeaScale and I'd tell the entire company I could either post it anonymously, or I can go through and actually tag my name to it and say, okay, this is my idea, blah, blah, blah. This is how I'm going to actually improve it and get the customer support time down from 15 minutes to 11 minutes. And then all my constituents, all my colleagues, they can go through and say, yep, we like that idea, or no, we do not like that idea. At what point does it actually go in? Do you still need some kind of approval from the leadership team to be like, okay, this had a certain amount of upvotes, we're going to go ahead and pass it? Or is there kind of a different process inside of that?
So without getting into the technicals of our software, it can be configured based on your organization's processes. Okay. So some organizations say, okay, ideas hit a certain number of votes, or it's hit a certain rank. Now we're going to pass it to finance to make sure it makes financial sense. At IdeaScale, for example, when we use our software in-house, If it's product ideas, my product team is constantly monitoring the cool ideas, and they're saying, okay, we like these 5 ideas. We're going to move them into the actual product roadmap. The marketing team is monitoring the marketing, dashboard. And you as a customer service employee can submit either to the marketing idea area or to the product idea area. Or actually, a fun one we did recently was we picked a new mascot for the company. And anyone, whether you're in customer support or sales, or whether you're a customer, could suggest.
Anyone
And it
can
was
get
an
a say in that.
employee from
Yeah.
like South Africa who'd been with the company for like 3 or 4 months who actually chose the winning submission.
Love it. I love it. So with these organizations, you have some big name clients, and so I'm assuming what's your guys' average ticket size? So what number of employees do companies have to have for this to be
Yeah.
very viable of a software product?
So look, our software is typical enterprise grade software, which means it's candidly selling between $30,000 to $300,000 a year, right? It's expensive. The good news is with that expense comes with a lot of enterprise grade security, fancy data stuff, integrations with other stuff. There's a lot of stuff built into the tech that is above and beyond what we're just talking about, right? The core of what we described could be whipped up by somebody easily. All the enterprise software stack that's needed is a lot more complex. Um, I think our software is really useful for an organization once it starts becoming distributed both in geography and internally in silos, which I typically say somewhere happens between 500, north of 500 people. So in fact, if you're below 100 people, our software is totally free. So whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're running a mom and pop grocery store, or you're like a 95% organization, you can go to ideascale.com. Our software is totally free. After about 500, I think most organizations would benefit from something like IdeaScale. Obviously, I would love if people came to our software, but whether or not you come to our software, I really think there is a need for organizations once they hit that magic 500 number to go get something that prevents them from being a CEO in an ivory tower and a bunch of peons below him or her.
And what kind of respect have you seen across these organizations for their employees? I feel like it would go both ways. The employees feel like their voice is finally heard. They've been working on the same task over and over for the past years. They know there's a better way to do it. But sometimes that corporate bureaucracy is the thing holding them back from actually solving the issue. So I feel like from the employee standpoint, it's a beautiful thing. Their voices finally feel heard. But then also from the high up management, maybe that has been displaced from the lower level organizations for quite some time. I feel like it's a way to stay in touch and make sure you truly understand how your product and your customers are actually feeling on a daily basis.
Absolutely right. The two big benefits we pitch are number one, it makes your community more engaged because our software is not just for your employees, right? Like one of the biggest fast food chains in the world use it not to engage with their employees, but to engage with their hundreds of millions of customers around the world. Um, so number one, we say the two benefits we say of our software are number one, it helps you engage with your ecosystem. And that ecosystem could be your customers, your shareholders, your employees, whoever cares about what you do as an organization. If you're a nonprofit, the people you serve, whatever, right? Um, that's benefit number one. Benefit number two is obviously the value of the ideas that come. You get better, right? We're trying to make you better at whatever you do, or whatever your mission is, or as an organization. Um, so yeah, yes, like both benefits really happen conditional on obviously an organization wanting to be better tomorrow, right? Our software, as much as I would love it to be, is not a silver bullet. If an organization doesn't want to be better tomorrow, no amount of software or money is going to solve that problem. You have to have a heartfelt need.
Definitely. And I like that term you just used there, silver bullet. I'm currently listening to Ben Horowitz, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. That's a topic he talks about a lot inside of this book. Is a lot of times employees will come with these great ideas and it'll be the silver bullet, but they need the lead bullet that's actually going to go in and get the kill done. And so sometimes we'll talk on the surface level in our organizations, and it'll be hard to actually convey some of our points we're trying to manage across different channels. And so sitting back from my business standpoint, I mean, our company only has less than 10 employees, and I can see a use case for this where I'm like, sometimes we are a little bit disconnected. Somebody might have a timid hand that they're trying to raise in the back of the classroom and not be able to get their voice heard overall.
Yeah, the timid hand is actually one of the things that's was a learning experience for me, right? I'm a loud extrovert. It's very easy for me, whether I'm junior or senior. I never had a trouble raising my hand, and in class and in work, whatever. But it turns out that that's abnormal. There's a lot of people, even if senior people, who are just not loud extroverts, and or they may not feel confident about their speaking skills or their writing skills. So that the ability to like take time, share an idea in a structured way, share it potentially anonymously, really decreases the negative impacts of that introverts suffer, or not just introverts, but people who lack necessarily presentation skills suffer within an organization.
So what's your guys' main goal at the end of the day? Well, are you, as you just stepped into this role, are you trying to grow this to be the next $5 billion company? Are you trying to sell it off in the next few years? What's your end goal?
Sure. So IdeaScale is in a really privileged position of being entirely bootstrapped. We have one owner, and I report to him.
That is so
So what that
awesome.
means
You do not hear
is,
that very often.
yeah, it's very rare, very fortunate. So I don't have any politics. I don't have any venture capital saying you have to sell the company 1 year, 5 years, 10 years from now. So look, I have two missions. Number one, I'm trying to create value for my three constituents, which are my shareholders, my customers, and my employees, right? I want to create good, stable jobs for my employees. I want to create an awesome product for my customers. And I obviously want to generate returns for my shareholders. That's goal one. Goal number two is I actually genuinely care about this notion of innovation or idea meritocracy, me personally, even before I stepped into IdeaScale. And IdeaScale, I really think, does a good job at helping us move from a world where people's ranks, titles, what they look like matter to where ideas matter, right? And that's a really powerful change in how work culture is moving or it has been moving and is continuing to evolve that way.
I love that. I love that. So as we step back away from just idea scale, I want to talk about a couple business principles as we're coming up here on the close of the episode. For all the young founders out there who are just getting going on their journey, what piece of advice would you share with them as a prominent business figure to help them achieve their goals of eventually growing their company?
Sure. Thank you for the word prominent, by the way. I don't think I've quite merited that title, but I'll say three things that I've seen business leaders, whether they be entrepreneurs or CEOs of billion-dollar corporations, do less well than I would have expected. Number one, really understand how your business works. How does it make money? What are all the pieces and how do they fit together? Whether that be HR, whether that be finance. In software, there's this notion of customer lifetime value, and you'd be amazed how many CEOs of $100 million corporations can't do the math for customer lifetime value. If you can't do it, go hire someone who can. Like, learn how your business ticks, how it works as a machine, almost at a mechanical engineering level. That's really critical. And whatever you do, whether that be a hardware store, software company, nonprofit, whatever. Number two is running an organization, being impactful in an organization is really hard work. Whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're a CEO, right? I work somewhere between 80 to 100 hours a week. I like what I do, but it is very difficult. And that's on top of stuff that I dedicate to my family life. Be willing, enter that sacrifice consciously and know whether that is something you're willing to do or not. Because if you're not willing to do it, you're not going to be successful in whatever entrepreneurial venture you'll choose. And number three, it is really easy to, from a marketing point of view, it's really easy to be lost in the sea of Google ads and search keywords. Like, realize what your value proposition and where you're going to stand out. And if you can't find a way to clearly stand out in whatever you do, again, could be a nonprofit organization, for-profit, government. If you can't stand out in what your mission is and the value you deliver, you're going to find it very difficult to stand apart and not be lost amongst the crowd of people out there.
That makes perfect sense. I appreciate those three pieces of advice. I think the most practical as well is figure out what point in your life you're at. Are you willing to go put in those 80 to 100-hour work weeks? Or is there other things that are going to be consuming your time right now that you can't necessarily put in that same effort? And it's not to say that you can't get it done. I know plenty of other business owners who work the typical 40 to 50-hour work week, and they make a great living, and it's feasible for them in this moment in life. But you have to sit back and actually ask yourself the hard truth over the next course of 1, 5, 10 years from now. Where do I see this going? What is my exit strategy? What you have to have those conversations early on.
Yeah,
I guess what I'm trying to
every
say.
job is like 80 to 100 hours weeks, but just realize what sacrifices you're willing to
Right.
make, whether that be money, time, priorities in life, sleep, right? Whatever it is.
Yeah, that's always the one with the asterisk is sleep for every entrepreneur out there. I love it. Well, Nick, as we're closing out on today's episode, I want to ask you one final question here. You're obviously a big fan of crowdsourcing, so if you could talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Crowdsourcing is just a fancy catch-all word for the, using the power of crowds. My favorite reference to this is, I don't know if you've ever heard of the term prediction markets, but it's this idea that you can rank things that are happening in the world and price them up or down, just like a stock market, right? Microsoft stock goes up and down based on the collective decision-making power of every stock investor on the planet. Um, Crowdsourcing is the same idea that there's all this intelligence hidden within the wisdom of crowds. How do you gain access to it in a cost-effective way, right? Like the silliest example is in voting. You see all with the election coming up, you see all of these people running surveys because they're trying to tap the collective, they're trying to tap the collective number, what's in people's heads to figure out what's going to happen in the election. But that's a very silly, simple use case to figure out one event. But there's just so much intelligence hidden in people's brains you want to draw that out in a cost-effective way. And again, that's just like a fancy way of describing exactly what IdeaScale software does.
I love it. Yeah, that it encompasses the entire point of your software. It's helping the small minority voice actually get heard in an organization or life in general. So I appreciate that. Well, Nick, as we're closing out right now, I appreciate you for joining today's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast. Guys, as always, inside the episode description down below, I'm going to include Nick's LinkedIn profile as well as his website so you can go and actually check out IdeaScale. If you're one of these business owners who would actually benefit from using the software, make sure to go check it out. Even if you're in that early stage, like Nick said, it can be very beneficial for anyone with under 400 employees as well. So with that being said, Nick, we'll include all of that in the episode description. Any final words you'd like to leave with the audience here today?
Just one slight amendment to what you said. As a reminder, our software is completely free for anybody below 100 people.
100 people. My mistake. Perfect. Well, guys, once again, check out the episode description down below to hear more from Nick. And with that being said, we'll see you guys next Friday for another episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast.